Hello. Upon hearing Illuminati's leak of the rumour that Hasbro were no longer considering using Sentai footage from Toei to continue their production of Power Rangers, I read a lot of reactions and thoughts on it, but one particular thing I did not see was any speculation on what they could do with the franchise. Save the animation tidbit left, Illuminati. So I thought I'd put in the somewhat wave of negativity, I thought I would put together a list of more optimistic thoughts on changes in production and production methodology that could be used for the upcoming seasons. One particular thing I note is that Power Rangers has no soundtrack. It has a list of library music that it uses on a series across multiple seasons, but it doesn't have an independently made soundtrack the likes of Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, and from the opposite side of the world, Doctor Who. This means that these sounds aren't nearly as iconic as some of their science fiction brethren. This is something that could be instated, possibly using a movie budget, that could serve Hasbro in the future. One of the things that does concern me about the future is, with the loss of the Sentai footage from Toei, we could possibly lose the suit nation for these Megazords. Trouble is, and I'm finding this with movies, there is a constant fight between what is real and what is unreal in CGI aspect. The Transformers, as I saw them in the film, never ever seemed to blend in with their environment. It always stood out as fake. It wasn't believable. I was watching a cartoon, and I did see it, and I have not seen a lot of their films. And I don't think I got through one all the way through, but there is always a constant resistance. Now, CGI, when it works well, but there is a constant battle over the suspension of disbelief, whether something is credible. Now, CGI in a few cases works. The Tony Stark's Iron Man suits and the Baron is back in 2017, because I feel because they had a physical prop, people tended not to notice that the CGI suits weren't physical props. They were forgiven of this aspect because the armored suit, ultimately, it's like something real. It's not something that requires disbelief. But the Transformers, Megazords, and of course the Incredible Hulk all don't fall into this category. They are on a larger scale than your average human being, already pushing that sense of disbelief. So, in practice, I'm wondering, is ditching the suitmation actually going to make... Is ditching the suitmation actually going to be beneficial? Because the suit, at least, is real. It may be trickery that put it there, but it is a real artifact, which would again put something on the side of it's real in this suspension of disbelief balance. Although you could do a lot more, I think Power Rangers has a point in this aspect. People are expecting there to be a suit, so why not play to that? Why not make a suit and then add CGI over it or to it, rather than replace it completely as it did in the 2017 movie? It's something very practical about that. But leave your thoughts on that one, your own thoughts on that one. One thing I don't see done often, though, I haven't seen anything, is when we did not have CGI in the likes of Terminator, or were slightly lesser examples, Short Circuit, we actually saw a lot of robotics happening in movies, and it's not that. Since the days of CGI, we haven't actually done that. We have not. We've said we'll stick someone in the suit, in the caption suit, and we will render it in post, which is quite sad. But my mind always sticks to one opportunity of situation, that you could always put robotics onto a physical suit. My thoughts go back to Doctor Who, the Pandoricus opening days, one of the season finales, where they had a guard mark the under Stonehenge, the cabin under Stonehenge. One of the things you will note about that particular Cyberman sentry was the actor that played him actually was also joined the sentry in not having an arm. Literally, the arm stopped here, the arm of the actor stopped here, and they had bits of broken circuitry and mechanisms standing out the side. But I'm wondering, could we not do the same? And then could you not done the same? Have someone, an actor whose arm stopped here, and do all this bit in the mechanism? In the mechanism, quite Doctor Who has a less limited example. All the Daleks' domes on top of the paperboard are in fact radio controlled. They are not controlled by the internal actor, as it was in the classic run. So, yes, could two people not man the Megazord suit instead of one? Could we not bring that forward as a change? One of the things I've noticed watching the recent run of Ultraman Z is they seem to use a lot of shots viewing upwards from the perspective of the lander's halfway margin, looking upwards at the giant monsters. I don't see this used a lot in Toei's tokusatsu nowadays. You could probably think of an example, I could be wrong, but I've seen it a lot more frequently. In the Ultraman series, somewhat. But that got me thinking in itself, For starters, we haven't seen any reaction shots of the general public on Power Rangers or Super Sentai, any of the ones I've seen recently. The last one I could think was Gokaiger, Japanese footage in Gokaiger, during the main invasion of the Zanyak. That was the last time I could think of. But anyway, with this lack of fear, with this lack of threat, this clearly visible threat, it somewhat undermines the general tension that you get in a shot. It genuinely feels like everyone will be safe. And I suppose if you're appealing to a 3-year-old, that would be the point. But it is a form of censorship, and it's a form of censorship that I think should be reviewed a lot more often. Speaking of which, every time I see one of these shots in Ultraman Z, there are never any people in that. There's never it is a static shot at the bottom of it with a model car or something of scale. It's cute, but there is absolutely no one in it. There are no people here to be threatened. It's the abandoned warehouse district all over again, but we get to see the warehouse. Yes, it is. I know for a fact that a lot of CGI movies use it to comp CGI people in, or people from other shots, or to blend us in. I would like to have seen more of that going forward to emphasize the threat and who exactly is being protected. I see the difference between the abandoned warehouse principle of Power Rangers versus the mass city being raised up in Avengers Age of Ultron. That seemed to sell the threat much more visibly, much more quickly. It didn't need to be that scale, but it did represent that danger. So, one of the things that has come much more recently into production is the use of an LED wall that comes around the entire set, which is more commonly now associated with the 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, Star Wars franchise, but with an active background that could be altered in direction and cast visible light shadows on a reflective surface on the set, rather than having to do that on a CGI unit. Now, this is quite nice. I don't see very many advantages against doing this on human-sized one on in the field. In a natural background, I mean, it's good, and the results can stand out, but presumably it would be far cheaper than running all lights to do so. It would probably be much more reserved filming technique for places which would require a far wider background. But I would like to point out, once again, I mentioned earlier that nothing ever happens in a Megazord shot. What about the Megazord? We can only build so much set. We can only put so many model cardboard buildings in any given shot, right? So, if we could use that technology to create an active sky, based on a video of an active sky, we could stretch the city far wider than any given set would allow. We could create damage in CGI. We could move models, that we could even film a live detonation off screen, project that onto the set, on another set, project that onto this set in the background. That is equally possible. It would also allow some active things we wouldn't necessarily get, like lines in the sky left behind by planes. I can't remember the name of them at the moment, sorry. Planes themselves, helicopters, any air traffic, birds, going, coming, going. It also says further buildings. Yes, I covered that. Thank you. Thank you, notes. But yes, the air traffic, further car traffic in particular, if it was on the land, you can see the lights going on and off. That it would be very easy to change from daylight to one of those lovely red sunsets that we get in Dark Ranger, the Thunder Megazord. Season 2 shots. This would be worth taking that into consideration. I suppose of the Illuminati article, we come to the elephant Zord in the room. The animation. Okay, so, and I hope purely for stylistic choice, Hasbro would probably want to move to an animation format. This is very unfortunate for something that's been live action for nearly 20 odd years, but at least I could understand it. Elim mentioned what chance it would probably match the earlier Saban if it's in joining it to Stell, now more commonly associated with Miraculous Ladybug. That's as I can see. Unfortunately, see Hasbro going down that route over a classic 2D animation. I certainly would have no interest in either animation, and 2D one less so. I feel it would move further away from brand value. Sorry, Elim. Even though it is, I will accept the more dramatic format. But that rendering of CGI has more active dynamic shots during a fight sequence than is known for two-dimensional animation. Two-dimensional animation rather set in a method of being a bit like a video game in that it is entirely flat. Only problem is you don't get to control anything. You just get to watch it happen, which is, I think, not going to attract the attention of a much younger audience. No, younger audience, but the same point is, but there is something in animation I think it's worth reviewing. Thinking back to the animation I have seen more recently, it's actually Thunderbirds Are Go, ATV franchise. ATV brand. They had an interesting point of using a model set against it and rendering their CGI characters onto it. Again, this was for three-dimensional plane. You can find the shot of the Tracy Island set, effectively their command center, in that point. But I'd like to point out that's not limited to just inside a building. We are used to be in a few locations. The quarry is infamous, for example, or the park, which seems, the park in Los Angeles, it seems to take up most of season 2. To be quite frank, we are used to some very limited locations in this. So why not just scale that down? We could create a blank park for ourselves, this forest in miniature, a quarry where we could do all that in scale and render the rangers into it, and literally take the cell in digital and quite literally key them in. This works very well for Thunderbirds Are Go when it comes to locations, and filming with the motion control camera would probably allow us to plan out active dynamic shots, not just for this season, but at all the points. All the parts specific to this season would probably end up on the CGI workload. The shots from the motion caption camera, the planned bits, probably be allowed for the same shot to be used, same camera shot to be used in the future season. You're not just investing in one. A shot you use in one becomes a shot you could use in 10. This over the CGI workload. Now, if Hasbro still has long-term plans, if it fancies going all the way to 50, then that could look like a serious proposition for them. They put the investment in as high resolution now as is humanly possible. But again, if we choose a skill modeling technique, all the techniques I have listed previously in this video, the use of active robotics, RC cars, I don't think I've mentioned previously. RC cars, the view up at something at Megazord level. All these still come back into play on a miniature set as much as it is on a much larger scale. How they would be implemented would be slightly different, but the effects would largely be the same. For the added bonus, they could stick that to Toei in that respect. Tokusatsu, Toei may have defined Tokusatsu, but Tokusatsu literally means special filming. A model set is special filming, regardless of what the eventual outcome is. Whether they happen to like the superheroes being live or not, that is a special filming and not a cartoon. It contains the film. So this would also lead to the possibility of you cross-meshing it. This would also lead to the possibility of you cross-meshing live action elements and CGI elements at the same time in some sort of Power Rangers version of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So existing props, existing suits, they would all come in that scenario, come into play and maintain a play for the duration, which is a fascinating technique. But I can see why they go to animation, because they currently spend a lot sending the actors to a location, whereas it would be cheaper just to hire an actor, put a sock over his head on a location, then render in the actor's likeness later. Could in fact be cheaper than actually getting an actor out there. So I can see why they would go for that, why they would choose that option, but I don't want to cheap out on it. For conclusion, I have a point to make, and it's an example which I'm growing up, watched lots of Thomas the Tank Engine, read books, stuff like that. Not uncommon for a young boy in Britain. But here's the thing that always strikes out to me the most is when it is precisely halfway between being a toy train and being an actual locomotive you would see about. Again, going back to the suspension of disbelief, it is best exactly halfway down that line. It's that it is not something it is something special from a mundane, which is exactly the point I'd like to bring to my conclusion. Whatever Hasbro chooses to do, I want them to remember this: it is a magic trick. The entire production is a magic trick. It's meant to leave you guessing where it is CGI, where it is that, wondering how they did that. That is one of the fundamental points of this. We look at Power Rangers and we wonder where the footage was shot. That is an active part of what the franchise is now. It's unavoidable. So my point of this video is, I hope going forward in the future, they will take into consideration the production methods they use, whatever program they're going to make a spectacle of it, to make something that is going to make us wonder how they did it. And, yeah, that concludes the video. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time.